These venues are shutting at the rate of about 2 a month.
Without the development of new artists, there will be no headliners of Glastonbury of tomorrow.
If they cut out the small live music venues, where does everybody go?
The government need to be able to invest in tomorrow's music, otherwise we're not going to have a music scene anymore.
Seeing this complete collapse of our grassroots ecosystem.
And if you take away that bottom level, the whole thing collapses.
You don't have great big massive
experiences.
Music is a staple of British culture and a part of everyday life for many. People attend live music events as a way to disconnect and immerse themselves. It provides a place of community and melodic connection, where musicians can find their sound and talent is refined. However, without change, the UK music industry is at risk. Grassroots music venues are being lost at a substantial amount. According to Music Venue Trust, in 2023 we lost 125 venues, with another 25 closing last year. Should these venues that are the foundation of the UK music ecosystem sustain this rate of closure, there will be a significant impact on both the UK's culture and economy. First of all, we need to look at the reasons that these venues are closing. There is a clear disproportion as stadium shows, arenas, big festivals and major league artists are all thriving in the industry that is worth billions to the UK. However, of the 810 UK grassroots music venues, a staggering 43% operated at a loss in 2024. The profit margin across all these venues was less than half, leaving each venue with a profit of just over £3,000 on average.
In the last 4 years, we've lost 30% of venues, there or thereabouts, mainly due to reasons such as rising costs, soaring energy bills, cost of living crisis. People don't have the same level of disposable income as they may have done pre-pandemic. Rents shot up by 40% last year, and it's just become really untenable for many grassroots spaces to kind of operate in this current market.
Behind all the statistics, there is a name, a face, and a story to each and every person who works in this industry.
My landlord at the time, he wanted to sell up. He'd been here for many years. He just wanted to sell up and move on. And with him trying to sell up, we had social housing groups, student accommodation groups. You know, we had all these housing groups and so on wanting to buy the building. They were putting offers in, and ultimately we had 3 years left on our lease. So we were waiting for our lease to finish and then not to renew our lease and then throw us out. So that threat then became, so big. It was imminent that the closure of the business. What we're seeing is a whole generational shift in drinking habits and so on and so forth. Live music in grassroots music venues has been subsidised by wet sales on the bar. So we've gone from, before COVID, about £13 a head being spent, and then that money then getting reinvested into live music, to now it being as little as £6 a head. So it's trying to find that kind of like, how are we going to get this investment back into live music? We shouldn't have to be relying on people drinking alcohol for us to be able to put on another gig or give another band a chance.
This is a problem when in 2024, 78.4% of income came from food and beverage, whilst only 21.6% came from ticket sales. Another problem that is affecting grassroots music venues is the cost of touring crisis. The length of a tour is decreasing, with key locations being missed from the primary and secondary touring circuit. In 1994, the average length of a tour was 21.9 shows, with 28 towns and cities on the primary and secondary touring circuit. 20 years later, a tour is now 10.9 shows on average, with only 12 locations on the touring route. From Bath to Cambridge, Norwich to Derby, Newport to Wolverhampton, and York to Dundee, these towns and cities are no longer on the primary or secondary touring circuit.
We're finding definitely in more kind of regional areas, these venues can't actually get the talent to the spaces. So yeah, we're seeing this complete sort of like, collapse of our especially grassroots ecosystem.
It involves, van hire, hotels for multiple people, wages for all those musicians that are out on the road, tour managers, merch people. Like, there's so many things involved in taking a show out on the road. And even if you're playing in small venues, you find yourself looking at the routing of a tour, and you might say, well, we could just, rather than doing Blackburn, Sunderland, Hull, why don't we just do one massive show in Manchester, or one massive show in the Northwest somewhere, whether it's a big Warrington show or a big Manchester show, because then we've only got one night of hotels after the show, and that will reduce your costs. And if you can just get a bigger venue and put more people in it.
So why are these venues so important?
The British music industry is worth £7 billion to the British economy, right? It's huge. Our creative industries are enormous, and they're our sort of international calling card, our global superpower. We really need to protect them and look after them. Grassroots venues are the R&D department, if you like, for some of our global superstars. They cut their teeth, they perfected their art at these grassroots venues up and down the country.
These venues have been the starting ground for any of your favourite artists. It's where they develop their talent and evolve into performers. The Beatles are a prime example of a band that were able to reach the heights they did because of the countless hours spent honing their craft on the small and independent stages.
So we go from their first incarnation as the Quarrymen in 1956 and go through to when they last played Liverpool in 1965. I totaled up 110 different live music venues that they played just in the Liverpool area. Most days they'd be playing twice, but quite often they'd be playing 3 times. So they could play lunchtime at the Cavern, then they go and play somewhere else in the Merseyside area, and then they come back and play at the Cavern again. So they'd be playing 3 times a day because they're playing for hours together. There's that intuition which a band has between group members. You now understand what each other's doing. You're learning new music. You're learning how to develop that. And you need that apprenticeship on stage. And you need to be on stage and make mistakes and learn from those mistakes. Because that's what happens to musicians. You have to work hard. And the only way to do that is in live music venues, because that's where the musicians learn. That's what the Beatles did. That's what all those other bands did. And you listen to any successful musician tell me how they got there. It will have taken them years and failures and arguments and mistakes. But that's what you've got to do to make it.
I don't think any musician or artist can really excel on those bigger stages without going through smaller venues and independent venues. It's where you learn to cut your teeth. It's where you learn to interact. Like we said, that's where you have to interact with the crowd, whether you're the session musician or the artist. Like, you are having to engage with the crowd that is in front of you, because they are literally in touching distance sometimes. And that's where you learn how to perfect your stagecraft, your identity as a performer.
Nearly 20 million people visited grassroots music venues in 2024. They are the heart of local communities, providing spaces where people can connect, share experiences and celebrate their love for music together.
At the time in Swansea, there was a lot of spaces that closed. There was only large music venues. There was nothing like 250 cap. So I felt like there was a gap in the market to, want to open another community space, or somewhere for young bands to go. It's somewhere for people to express themselves. The outcasts who don't really fit into the normal bars and stuff like that. Something for these people to express themselves and to nurture their careers. And not only bands and so on, grassroots bands, but people who can't play instruments, who just want to watch live music, who want to be that next generation of youth culture. This is a place for them, for me.
The idea of culture becoming inaccessible, mainly to the working class, I think is really sad. It's like people just can't afford to come together anymore, and people are losing access to these experiences, which are crucial in so many ways for our mental health, for community and coming together. If you're in on a dance floor with someone, doesn't matter who they are or what they think, we're all kind of there, and I feel like it kind of is the glue which keeps us all together.
Loads of them do so much work, not just promoting live bands, but also loads of work with youth groups, with disadvantaged communities, with bringing on different arts, supporting people with learning disability or neurodivergent, or people, they do a ton of really, really cool work in the local community.
The economic importance of these venues cannot be understated. The contribution of grassroots music venues was valued at over £500 million to the UK economy in 2024. The sector also employs around 30,000 people and allows the likes of musicians, technicians and promoters to form careers for themselves. For every 10,000 people who attend a gig, £1 million is spent in the local economy.
I don't think the government fully understand the value of our creative industries. They certainly don't quite get how absolutely vital these grassroots venues are to the music industry, which is worth so much to our national economy, £7 billion, and how integral they are to artists and to communities. And as you say, to high streets. So if you go out to watch a gig, inevitably you might go for a drink beforehand or something to eat beforehand. You'll park in a local car park. You may pick something up from the local shop.
Do you look at the high street in those towns where those venues and clubs are sort of the main attraction maybe to that particular part of the town, and that those places aren't as busy now. The amount of footfall that's going through those places will be dramatically lower now because of that, because one of the biggest attractions and biggest drivers of our economy in the UK, which is live music, is decreasing in those areas, and those venues aren't getting used, and therefore the venues are having to close.
These venues are also home to a wide spectrum of genres, especially the likes of dance and electronic music. These small, independent locations are where these scenes are born, and electronic artists can test new sounds free from corporate polishing. Without these venues, genres that rarely reach the big stages would lose the spaces that bring their underground sounds to life. Charities such as Music Venue Trust and Save Our Scene are working endlessly to keep grassroots music alive. A record number of over 200 venues sought help through the Music Venue Trust Emergency Response Service, and 17 spaces sought financial support from their Emergency Hardship Relief grants in 2024. The charity has also purchased several venues, including the Bunkhouse, under its ownership scheme that purchases sites and rents them back to operators under a fairer and sustainable lease.
I've been a member of Music Venue Trust since we opened. We certainly wouldn't have got through things like COVID if it wasn't because of Music Venue Trust. Their help and the way that they helped us navigate through these times, from COVID to the energy crisis, and to be honest with you, it's just great to have a pool of people who know how hard this is, and it's been life-changing, if anything, and it's certainly helped us as a business and as a venue, and not only with them buying the building, everything else as well. The help and everything that we've received from them is outstanding.
So Save Our Scene is an organisation I started during lockdown. Started off as a campaign fundraising for musicians during a pandemic who were getting very little support from the government. So really kind of just sort of throwing mud at the wall, fundraising mainly through social media. And then we turned more into kind of an advocate for the protection of our live music sector. So we really need to kind of ensure that we create a sustainable ecosystem, and have partnered with Music Venue Trust, who are the leading UK charity supporting grassroots venues. And we've set up a fund with them called Liveline, which is supporting venues, artists and promoters as well, who are an essential part of the ecosystem. And yeah, we've been campaigning for this ticket levy to be put on the stadium and arenas, which would see £1 of every ticket sold at that level go back down to support grassroots music through funds like Liveline. We have signed up Coldplay to donate 10% of their proceeds to venues, artists and promoters through Liveline. Sam Fender's just done £1 of every ticket, and Katy Perry's about to do £1 of every ticket. And the government have just made it policy that this needs to happen on all stadium and arena shows. So that's sort of our main focus at the moment, is trying to get this grassroots contribution put in across all major shows over 5,000 capacity to help create a sustainable live music ecosystem.
Going forward, it is obvious that things must change to secure the survival of grassroots music in the UK.
Without the development of new artists. There will be no headliners of Glastonbury of tomorrow, if you like. You know, we're going to run out of times Coldplay and Guns N' Roses and, you know, whoever, you know, can do it. You know, we're going to run out of times where the people who are already headlining those festivals can continue to do it. And who's going to take their place? Like, who's going to be the headliner of Glastonbury in 2035? We've got an amazing track record of making incredible music that sells billions all over the world, and that needs to start with them developing at the beginning. So I think that there's actually a responsibility of every aspect of the music industry to take some responsibility to try and nurture that talent.
Charities and committees are pressuring the government for change, and the introduction of a voluntary levy is a big step forward.
On the whole, the government rejected nearly all of our recommendations. The one that they did quite like was the idea of the levy. They agreed with us that it should start off as a voluntary levy, and if the sector doesn't come together to implement this, then they would look at making it mandatory. There has been some movement by the sector to come together and try and sort of coalesce around the idea of a levy.
The level of income this could generate if it was blanket across all stadium arenas is substantial. You know, it could be, you know, between 20 and 30 million annually, which is obviously like a huge sum. And if that was in place, would we have seen any of those venues close down last year? I don't know. I don't think so. Maybe a couple for other reasons.
Everything relies on each other. It's a bit like the football pyramid, you know, that money goes from the Premier League teams right down to the lower leagues, in order that, because they recognise that those are the feeder teams, those are where a lot of their best players come from.
The committee has also called for a change in VAT for these venues. Currently, UK venues are paying 20% VAT compared to the average of 10% on European tickets. During the pandemic, VAT on live music in the UK was cut to 5%, yet this has since reverted back to 20%.
We know that our recommendations make sense. How do we know this? Because they've already been picked up by the Australian government. They were looking very positively, and an Australian select committee's just come out with some recommendations for their live music sector, which bear a striking resemblance to ours. The German government have been looking at this. We know that we're on the right track. We just need this sector to come together. You know, it's not rocket science. There are a lot of people making a lot of money out of music at the top end. They need to recognise that they've got to support their own grassroots and come together and coalesce to make this sustainable for everybody. And the government needs to recognise they have a part to play as well.
These venues are more than just bricks and mortar. They represent a space where artists can hone their craft, where crowds become communities, and where music becomes memories. The introduction of a levy is a big step forward for keeping the small stages alive. It's a reinvestment in creativity, access and opportunity. With support from the top of the industry, grassroots music venues will survive, enabling jobs to become viable, musicians to develop, and melody to echo through every town, every city and every stage. When we protect the grassroots, we protect the future of UK music.